Welcome to the West Coast Clouds podcast. This is Nick, your host. This is the new vape podcast for vapors, where we bring you opinions, reviews, and industry news. You're listening to West Coast Clouds.
Okay, so here's my proposition. This is what I wanted to lay out. I wanted to lay out in all this kerfuffle about the nicotine limitations. Because of the youth getting their hands on nicotine and making this whole fucking epidemic problem, here's my suggestion. People have been saying they want to limit the nicotine. Here's what I say. Yes, go ahead. Let's limit the nicotine. So before I go on my tangent, here's what's proposed. There's something in the 30s, like 36 milligrams or something is what they want to have the limit at. Should this exist? Should this limitation exist? Yes and no. Yes, there needs to be some sort of restrictions. Since corner stores and gas stations don't require ID to get inside, there needs to be some limitation there. Obviously, one, there needs to be a limitation on what they're allowed to show. But number two, they need to limit the nicotine that's available at this place so that kids can't come here and try to get high. Okay? Does this make sense? So you're lowering the nicotine there. That's okay. I understand that. There you go. Let's do the limitation, but we're only doing the limitation to the corner stores, the gas stations, and the liquor stores that are selling this stuff. So where it shouldn't apply, where this nicotine limitation should not apply, is specialty vape shops. Okay? Because only someone with an ID, only an adult, is allowed to enter the vape shop. Right? And the vape shop windows have nothing. They're frosted. We have rules. We cannot show or advertise. Okay? So if an adult is coming into a vape shop, and only adults are coming in, they should be free to choose the nicotine strength of their choice. They're adults. They're allowed to make adult decisions. And whatever they need to get off the cigarettes, they should be allowed to do that. I'm okay with the nicotine strength limitations. I'm all for it. It should be only for these third-party stores. It should not apply to vape shops. It's just that simple. The vape shop should not have a limitation to the nicotine. It's for adults only. There are no kids strolling by and seeing anything outside. There's no kids entering because they're getting ID'd when they come in. However, it's not the case at a liquor store or a convenience store or a gas station where they have marketing outside and they have these high-strength nicotine vapes available. It's too easy. So limit them so they don't have these things available to them. Limit them so that kids aren't thinking, oh, we'll just go to the gas station and we'll stand outside or we'll wait for somebody to get us something. Someone who doesn't understand this vaping shit will just, let's get this guy to get us some stuff. This way it's not available. So, yes, I'm okay with the nicotine limitations, just so long as it doesn't affect specialty vape shops. There's probably several different ways you can look at this, but that's just one way. That's one way I see looking at it. I've got Wilson here, actually. Wilson's one of our sales reps over at West Coast Clouds, and I just want to get everyone's kind of opinion on this because it's important to kind of hear everyone's thoughts. Wilson's been managing a vape shop up in Squamish for a little while, so I'm interested to see what he has to say. Wilson, can you? What do you think about that?
So I've heard a lot of talk about this subject. It's going around in emails. It's going around when I'm visiting other stores. I'm talking it to my customers in the stores, and I think regulating where you can buy high milligram nicotine would be a good step in the right direction of keeping it out of the hands of underage kids. But do I think it is one of the most effective solutions? I don't think so. I think there are other things that we can think of. I think the community right now is just, bubbling up with ideas, trying to figure out something. And I think we need to look at what we can do and what we can't do. And I think what we can't do is stop, people that are older than 19 buying products for people that are under 19. And you can see that with alcohol. And other like tobacco smokes and even marijuana and stuff like that. There's no way that we can possibly know that if someone comes into the store, they're going to buy something, they're going to give it to their kids. It's honestly on them. That's they're the ones that are breaking the law, and there's not much that we can honestly do about that. But I do think limiting where you can get that high milligram nicotine would be a good step. But I think there are other culprits out there that play a larger role into how these products are getting into kids' hands. I think Obviously, like I stated, people buying for other people, there's not much we can do about that. But what I think there is stuff that we can do, which I think is the online presence of vaping. When you look online, where do you see vaping? You see vaping on YouTube, you see it on Instagram, it's everywhere. And all of those places, they are all linked to online stores. And we all know that age verification is not a real thing. You go to a store, you put in an age, you're in. Like, that's not a real gate for underage people to do ordering or to see, illicit material. So what I have heard that through, it's new regulations that these, vape products you have to sign for when you order them online. But in the last 6 months, I've put in 3 orders. And I've gotten juice delivered to my door. I haven't needed to sign anything. Granted, I'm only getting 3 milligram nicotine, but I see no evidence of that actually taking effect. And I think that's something that maybe we could definitely do. That's a possibility. You could have a package if you're ordering it online. It just says nicotine, contains nicotine. That way it's available for the parent to see, the person delivering the package to see, and then require a signature for. And the one question I wanted to ask that I wasn't even sure of, because Juul seems to be one of those devices that the kids are getting their hands on. If you do order from Juul, like straight from the website, do you have to sign for it? Because I don't know. Like, I've ordered, like I said, in the last 6 months, a couple packages. I haven't had to sign for anything. So it would be good to know, if you are ordering a Juul online, do you really have to sign for it? Do you really have to be of age? Are they really checking? So I think we need to shift our expectations. We're not going to be able to regulate people buying products for other people, but I think we can regulate the online presence of vaping and somehow find solutions to limit their ability to just go online, put in a phony age, and order something for themselves. Because they're not going to get their hands on the products in shops that are 19 plus. They're going to get ID. They're not going to get their hands on their products when they go into convenience stores. And they're not going to get their products when they go to the pharmacy either. There's just, people get ID'd. That's what happens. So I think, again, I think we need to shift the expectations of what we can actually do. And I think a lot of this falls on the online presence, and it falls on the parents for being educated and knowing what their children are getting up to. And we need to surround those parents with education and get all the silly stuff out of there, and keep vape products in age-restricted areas. I think when talking about this subject, one thing to consider is the availability of vape products online, and the influence it has on the underage population. When you look at Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Snapchat, all the places where you see vaping online, there's always links in the descriptions to online stores. And as we know, age verification isn't really a deterrent. You can just put in a phony age, you get into the website, you see and can order illicit material. And what I've heard of happening is, I haven't witnessed it, but I've heard of it, is that you have to show, when you get a nicotine product online, they're supposed to ID you, you're supposed to sign for it. But in the last 3 months, I've made 3 orders from online stores, and I haven't had to sign or ID or get ID'd for any of that product. Now, I don't know if that's because I'm just ordering 3 milligram nicotine. I don't know if that changes when it goes to higher milligram nicotine. But I think, hey, if someone does decide to order 50 milligrams online, they should have to show age verification and sign for it when the package is delivered. I'm not sure how they do it in different industries when you order things like, alcohol or marijuana or tobacco online. Surely there's something in place to prevent underage populations from ordering that stuff. And I think the same thing should come in effect for ordering high milligram nicotine products online, or any nicotine products online. I think that's a pretty easy step. You could slap a sticker on it, just as they do on the regulated bottles, the skull and crossbones, the warning signatures, and stuff like that. And that would show that the delivery person, they need an ID requirement, and they need a signature, and it would also show the parents that if they were the ones that actually open the door and see this package there, like, well, okay, this is a nicotine product. It would be very apparent. So I think another way to further this discussion is to start regulating the presence of vaping online and require that if you do order something online, just like you would if you were to buy something in a convenience store or a vape shop, that you need to show ID to receive that product.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately the problem is access to the products. Well, I know websites can be a big culprit, but websites just don't get the same traffic as a convenience store or a gas station, right? I mean, they're the ones catching the public's eye and essentially creating this whole problem, and then the vape industry is blamed for it. I've got Charles here of Fogged Out Vapes, based out of New Brunswick, all the way from the East Coast. Charles, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think the teen vaping epidemic is real? And how have you dealt with this? How do you ensure that people don't get a hold of your products that shouldn't be?
I think it's a real thing. I think it's actually an epidemic. The cause of it, that's to be determined, man. Kids eat Tide Pods nowadays, you know what I mean? We have to do something as an industry together. We have to come to a conclusion together and fight together for this. So, I mean, my personal input is lower the nicotine strengths, get it away from the C stores. That's what I think the major parts of it is. We've been proactive at Fogged Out Vapes for years now, and about carding people. So on first orders, when people order, they have to sign and show ID on your first order, and every order after that is logged. If they fail, then we never send a package ever again. So, and it gets returned to us. That's just how we've always done it. I think, yeah, it is a real thing. And I think the most important part about all this is we need to come together as an industry, and we need to stop fighting against each other and just work with each other. And it's inevitable. I mean, when Health Canada wants to put rules and regulations in, we have two choices. One, completely fight it and say, no, we don't want it, blah, blah, blah. That which never works, and then they'll do whatever the hell they want. Or have our voices heard and work with them on this and just come up with a solution that works for all of us. And in the end, if the solution means that we can help convert people from smoking to vaping and save lives, that's what it's all about. Or the other option is have no flavors, limited nicotine strength, and how many people are we helping then? So what it all boils down to is coming together as an industry and working together on this, and doing the best we can to limit youth vaping, which is a real problem.
You're right. I mean, this is ultimately the real solution. We need to come together as a community to solve these problems. That's the whole point of this podcast, is to try and get everyone's opinions and thoughts out there and see if we can come together to figure out a real solution for a real problem. Joining us on this topic is Saadiq from VanGo Vapes in Vancouver. Saadiq, what are your thoughts on this problem? Do you think kids would be better off without vapes at all? Because if you think about it, most of us started smoking when we were kids. And I can't help but wonder what it would be like if we had access to vaping products when we were kids instead of a traditional cigarette.
My opinion on this is in no way would I condone teen vaping. However, when you look at the stats and you look at really when do a lot of people start smoking, they often start in schools. And so this teen vaping epidemic, in my opinion, it should be taken with a grain of salt, because at the end of the day, although there are quite a few more that are starting to vape versus the ones that were starting to smoke, in my opinion, it's not as harmful as the cigarette addiction. So what we need to do as an industry is really find and crack down on the individuals or the stores that are responsible for getting these products out to underage people. Two things that I've heard about recently is a cap on nicotine. I personally think that where it's currently at, 66 milligram is a fair amount. When people hear the word 50 milligram, they often they right away think that's too much nicotine. But when you really compare it, if someone's going through, let's say 2 or 3 sub-ohm tanks of 4 mils, and there's 6 milligrams in there, they're getting through a similar amount of nicotine in a day as compared to someone with a 50 milligram in a pod or in a small device that they're using 1 mil a day or half a mil a day. So the number of, like the amount of nicotine that's actually in the liquid is a skewing, or it's almost like an illusion. And of course there are people that are going to abuse it. But I think where it's at right now, 66 milligram is fair. And I think that we need to focus on really cracking down. And from what I've seen, and there's a report that came out of Ontario, over 90% of the underage selling was being done by the corner stores. So we can see that it's obviously a big problem where corner stores are not adhering to the strict tobacco control laws. Whereas on the other hand, we have vape shops who are following the laws, and 9 out of 10 times it was not the vape stores. So this really shows that the industry is more on top of the teen problem than the general public. And so there has been some recommendations that high nic strengths should only be available in vape shops. And I would support that stance because we've seen that they're a little bit more cognizant on who they're selling to. And so if they're the ones who are carrying, let's say 50 milligram, and you can only get 20 milligram at the corner store, although we won't be able to stop the youth vaping, at least they're not getting their hands on extremely high levels of nicotine. As well, at the same time, we can kind of allow people to come into the vape stores and really get educated. They're not just going to a corner store and grabbing some high nic. They can actually go to a store where there's people that know what they're talking about. There are people that know about flavor, about nicotine, about devices. They're not just some random person who's just trying to chuck some stuff on you. And I think it's very important, the information and knowledge. Especially, I remember when I started vaping, I was so confused. Although it was very simple back then, it's very confusing. It's daunting. You're going from a simple cigarette. You take a cigarette, you light it, and you go on your way. To a new product that has all kinds of things, tanks and atomizers and coils and RDA, and you hear all these words and you get confused, and especially if you're in a corner store where the guy doesn't really care, he just wants to get you out of his face. He may not give you the right information, or he may give you information that's actually negative for you. So the two things that I would support is putting the high nicotine items in vape stores specifically, and I think we really need to crack down and increase the fines. If they're caught selling to minors, there should be a substantial fine, maybe even put it up to somewhere like 10 grand to really help deter people. And then work with the local tobacco enforcement agencies. I know that there's been some talk in the CBA of working with the actual agencies on coming up with a secret shopper program to really identify who are these bad cases that are causing or helping to push this youth epidemic forward.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I would never condone or encourage it, but there is a bright side to know that the kids are vaping instead of smoking. I mean, knowing that this is where most smokers started when they were kids, it does. There's a bright side to it somewhat there, knowing that they're not smoking cigarettes. I mean, corner stores and gas stations are clearly the biggest concerns right now as to why and how teens are getting access to these nicotine products. I mean, I think we can all agree that the high-strength nicotine juices should be limited to specialty vape shops and ideally increased fines for offenders while also putting on more restrictions for these corner stores and gas stations. A vape shop is truly the only place you can go that complies to staying out of sight and never letting an underage person inside. So it only makes sense to move these high nicotine products to a vape shop store only. Well, that's it. That's all we wrote. That's it. I want to hear from you guys. Everybody can chime in. Let's consider this a part 1. And then we'll do a part 2 of this. If anybody who wants to say something or contribute to this topic, it'd be rad. I mean, that's the idea. I want to get everybody's opinion. Obviously, there's only so much time in a day, and I can only get so much shit crammed in here. But this is why we're here. So if you have something to say, if you want to shoot me a video clip, anything like that, we'd love to have you on here. We can go live. We can do whatever you want. But thanks for tuning in, guys. This is Nick from West Coast Clouds, and you're listening to the New Vape Podcast. Welcome to the West Coast Clouds Podcast. This is Nick, your host. This is the New Vape Podcast for vapors, where we bring you opinions, reviews, and industry news. You're listening to West Coast Clouds.